Attorney Jonathan Elson, reminding you that if you've been injured in an auto accident, it's important to have somebody on your side. When you need a lawyer,
then you need Nelson.
I'm here to announce the arrest of 45-year-old Robert Tellis. He was booked in the Clark County Detention Center last night on the charge of open murder. This is a terrible and jarring homicide, one that has deeply impacted Las Vegas. Every murder is tragic, but the killing of a journalist is particularly troublesome. We hope the arrest of Tellis and his subsequent prosecution will ultimately provide a sense of justice for our community and Mr. Garman's family. And I would like to add, our work is done in this case. Detectives are still shifting through information. So in other words, the case is still continuing. We have several leads we're still following up on to solidify the case and to put to bed other allegations. So at this point, I'd like to bring Dory Korn, captain of the Homicide Bureau, forward, and he will walk you through the timeline associated with the case.
As you know, we began our homicide investigation about 5 days ago on Saturday, September 3rd. This was after we received a 911 call of an unresponsive male that was found on the side of his home. Our preliminary investigation revealed that the unresponsive male was deceased as a result of stabbings. We also determined pretty quickly that the victim was Jeff Garman, as the sheriff said. Jeff Garman is a well-known investigative reporter, and that was taken into account immediately. Some of the other things that were developed pretty quickly by our homicide investigation was that the suspect, as you see here in the photo to my left, your right, was wearing an orange shirt with reflective stripes, a straw hat, and was carrying a duffel bag in what was likely an attempt to either disguise his identity or conceal his identity. We also know that the suspect was walking westbound, approaching Garman's home on Friday, September 2nd, the day prior to us being notified. On that morning, he approached Mr. Garman's home and went to the side of the house. Shortly after, Garman came outside of the garage door and then went to the side of the house, and ultimately an altercation took place between the suspect and the victim. We believe this happened around 11:18 a.m., and at that time, our victim was stabbed multiple times. As Sheriff Lombardo pointed out, he initiated major case protocol immediately based on the circumstances, which allowed us to bring in a lot more resources to address a lot of the tips and leads and information coming in from the public. Our detectives and everyone involved in this case have been working nonstop since Saturday. This is a very important case for everyone involved. And on day 2 of our major case protocol, we developed a very critical lead, which was a vehicle that we identified. It was a maroon-colored GMC Denali that was suspiciously driving around in the neighborhood on the morning of the murder, prior to the murder, and then certainly was there at the time when the murder happened. That vehicle had stopped multiple times throughout the neighborhood and was behaving suspiciously, or was suspicious. The second key piece on day 2 was we determined that the suspect wearing the orange shirt had fled in that vehicle, which connected the vehicle to the suspect. As I mentioned before in our earlier statements, we've been working all possible leads on this case. We've been exploring all theories and conducting simultaneous investigations into every piece of information we came across. There were 2 main areas that we were focused on early on. One was ensuring that this was not connected to a burglary series or anything of the sort. And then 2, looking at any work-related grievances or conflicts related to Mr. Garman's work. We knew that as an investigative reporter, he had written several articles, and there were different allegations and statements about potential people that would be upset about it. One in particular that we identified early on was Robert Tellis as a person of interest, because Tellis was upset about articles that were being written by Garman as an investigative journalist that exposed potential wrongdoing, and Tellis had publicly expressed his issues with that reporting, and then ultimately Tellis was also upset, from what we found out later, that there was additional reporting that was pending. So at that time, we began focusing a little bit more on that as we conducted all of our investigative efforts. The other thing that was discovered by our detectives was there was a vehicle that matched the suspect's vehicle description, that maroon GMC Denali that was parked in front of Tellis's home. It was registered to his wife. And then we ultimately developed video evidence that showed that that vehicle, the GMC Denali parked in front of Tellis's home, had departed around 9 a.m. in the morning on the day of the murder and returned around 12 p.m. just after the murder, which matched our timeline. We immediately began working on search warrants, and then we began searching. We executed those search warrants early yesterday morning, and that involved searching Tellis's home, his vehicles, and then also searching his body to collect the DNA sample to compare it to DNA recovered during the crime. At that time, as you noticed yesterday, we were still building our case, continuing our investigation, and we were waiting on DNA results, and so Tellis was released as we continued to build our case. Detectives continue to work very aggressively. As the sheriff pointed out, we've built a culture around here where we expect relentless follow-up on every case we're involved in, so they were relentless in their efforts. We worked as quickly as possible, and shortly after, we developed information that indicated Tellis was driving the GMC Denali the morning of the murder. We also, through the search warrant effort, we recovered a pair of shoes, as you'll see here on my screen here to the left, that matched the suspect's description. Also, as you can see, there's apparent blood on the shoes, and the shoes were cut, likely in a manner to try to destroy evidence. In addition to the shoes, we recovered a straw hat that was also cut in a manner that was likely to destroy the evidence. And that straw hat, as you can see, matches the one in the photo. Just something to point out, that black brim is actually the interior part of the hat, a sweatband, not the exterior part. But we analyzed the hat, analyzed the shoes, and then ultimately, one of the most important aspects of this investigation was waiting on the DNA results, and we received positive DNA results that showed Robert Tellis's DNA at the crime scene. At that time, we immediately initiated our arrest operation and planning. The goal was to take Tellis into custody as safely as possible. And thanks to the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the leadership here, we were able to successfully execute that operation yesterday, and Tellis was taken into custody safely and arrested, as the sheriff talked about.